I just wanted to say something very briefly, and then we're just going to delve in. So 2 years ago, in Africana Studies, we were having a meeting. We were having one of our regular faculty meetings. And I'll never forget because Shanti Singham, who's standing right there, told me that I was a lunatic then. And I said, well, 50 is coming up. And this was really about 2 years ago. And I said, and so we have to do something really special. And I didn't say really big because actually the size of it was less of a concern for me. What was most important was putting a call out to all of the alumni who have benefited from courses and or faculty who have taught in Afro-American studies, in African American studies, and in Africana studies. And we had no idea what would happen when we put this call out. We just invited, as the college typically does. And we tried to cast a net as wide as we could in terms of students and former students in terms of alumni, but also thinking about faculty and former faculty. But for me, what was also important was thinking about the members of our community. Hopefully you'll have a chance to come, this is a shameless plug, for taking a chance to spend some time in the Special Collections exhibit for such a time as this. And for those of you who are local, that will be up essentially post through graduation, right? So it'll be up for a while. And I recommend if you don't get a chance to go today when we have some time at 3 o'clock, that you go and spend a little time in there. Well, one of the stories that the archives were telling was just about this broad sense of Black Williams. And for me, part of what that meant was making sure that members of the community who might not have been faculty and who might not necessarily be alums be a part of the conversation. And so this idea for this panel really came out of that, wanting to hear from members of the community in various ways. And so I'm just so very happy that you're here this morning and that you're here with us this weekend. I think that the conversations will be very fruitful, and they're meant to be that, right? Conversations. And so I'm going to turn it over now, but I just want to make sure that you know who everyone is. This right here to my right is the inimitable Sandra Burton. Who has been here at the college since 1983 and has been saving Black lives, truly, since she got here. And, she is, the most humble woman and would never, and really hates these kind of things because she's like, I'm just doing the work that I'm called to do, and we're just very grateful. Arif Smith is to her right, and Adrianna DeGazon is to Arif's right, and then Bilal Ansari, and I'll let them do their own kind of introductions and setting up, but I just wanted to express my gratitude publicly to you all. And I also wanted to let you know that behind them and behind the panelists is the libation plant. So I have been before each and all of the events pouring libations for those who have gone before. So wanted you to know that their spirit is here as well. Ashe, and welcome.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you. So this conversation is intended to be about community. And before we launch in, I'm going to ask each of the family members who are assembled before us this morning to introduce themselves.
Good morning. See, I love that. I love that call and response. It lets me know that we are certainly in community here. My name is Arif Smith. I am currently a program manager at Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago. All the Chicago love in the house. I came to Williams in the fall of 2006 as a campus life coordinator with the collateral assignment and multicultural programming and advising, which then led to my role as the assistant director of the then called Multicultural Center, now the Davis Center. And I was here for 4 years, left in 2010. But I continue to come back as an honorary alum, community member, family member, and I'm just happy to be here in fellowship with everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adrianna DeGazon. I'm an admissions counselor here. I'm also class of 2016. Whoop, whoop. When I was at Williams, I was a history major and an Africana studies concentrator. I took most of my classes in Africana study, maybe half of my curriculum was based through Africana. And so I'm glad to be part of this panel, both in my alumni capacity as well as a current staff member who's been here for about 2 years.
And I wish you all a very good morning. Really blessed to be in your presence. Those who paved the way before me, I'm honored to be in your midst. Last night was a blessing to hear your stories on how you made the way for me. So just really honored and blessed to be here. So I am Bilal, Ansari, and I serve in the Office of Institutional Equity, I started out as the first Muslim chaplain here in 2011. Did that for 3 years. Also helped as an assistant within the Center for Learning and Action. I worked there also for 3 years. Left there, I took a job on the West Coast at a small liberal arts college, a Muslim liberal arts college, helped them to get their accreditation. And then I came back to Williams, and I've been here for another 2 years, so 5 years total. So anyway, I'm honored to be in your presence.
Thank you, everyone. One of the charges from Ron was to steer a conversation that would inspire people to reflect on their time at Williams, anchored in what the meaning of community is. And so I'm just going to offer two definitions of community. One is, of course, from Webster's Dictionary, a classic, and the other one is my own. Community, a group of people who reside in a specific locality, share government, and often have common cultural or historical heritage, a group sharing common social, religious, or occupational interests. And of course, that expands over time. So here's my definition of community. As of this moment, when I think about my own participation in the Williams community, and when I think about the challenges and opportunities that the Williams community is facing now. So bear with me. Community. Porous circles that share a fixed or fluctuating location. Who is inside or on the circumference can change, causing the characteristics to shift, and the community to sometimes be fluid, flexible, or fixed. So given those two definitions, I am asking the panelists to think about the structure and the relationship that you have had to the Black community here at Williams College. And anyone can begin.
I think I want to begin, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
When I think about the community at Williams, I think about healing, pain, and it can be defined in a porous, way. It can define. My great-grandparents worked at Williams from 1926 until 1972. My great-grandmother, she just cooked for one of the white fraternity houses. I don't know the name. Sorry, Psy, something. I don't know. Not that important. And my great-grandfather, he was fair-skinned, but my great-grandmother was dark-skinned. And so when my father came up to Williamstown, they came from New York, from the upper East Side is where they grew up. So they would come up to visit their grandparents here. And at 12 years old, my father remembers a story of playing in the park, and there was a white person who called my father a nigger, and my father, being from New York, swung and hit him. And then the people in town told my grandpa, if you want to keep your job, they cannot ever, come back up here again. And so that severed the relationship between my father and his grandparents. And so there was a lot of pain to do with this town. I never even heard about Williams because it was a story that my father had pushed down. Until the job opening came up here, and I said, Dad, there's a job opening for like a Muslim chaplain, and it's at Williams College. He said, Williams College? Your great-grandfather and great-grandmother worked at Williams College. He says, maybe my healing is in your job there, So I applied, and I came to finals, and he came up here on the day when I applied, and he walked around. And the first thing we did, we walked to visit their graves here in town. And we didn't know where their graves was, so we asked one of the white, people who served the graveyard, do you know where Harry, Logan is? And they said, yeah, we know where Harry Logan is. Took us right to my grandfather and my grandmother's grave. And that was a sign for me that I was called, to be here. That service to this community is in my DNA. And my time here has been nothing but blessings. Doors opening up. Jobs elsewhere has been trying to call me, but Williams has fought to retain me. So a brother has risen that way. So. So it's been porous and painful and healing all at the same time. And I'm just happy to just be able to serve these black and brown, faces, seeing them smile, helping to, open up closed doors. And so that's my story of How you
all gonna beat that? I don't know. Thanks. So I have encountered Williams on so many different levels, right? As a student, as an alum, because my first year out of undergrad, I was not in Williamstown. And so I had a different relationship there. And now I'm back as a staff member. And so there are so many ways that I could really answer this question and think through this question. Williams was the first place where I encountered so many black people. That's kind of wild to think about. And I had grown up in a very diverse community, but to go to school with a cohort of black students that were in my classes, that was different for me. To see black faculty in front of the classroom, that was the first encounter that I had where I could see representation in the classroom. And so part of the impetus of me returning back to the purple bubble was because I knew the importance of representation for so many of our students, for us to be in spaces that are supporting students, and black students specifically, because they need that support on our campus. I am a product of that support. I couldn't have made it through Williams without that support. I remember being in Bilal's office my sophomore spring and thinking about leaving. It was a really hard time in Williams' history, or in my 4 years on campus, and I had stuff going on at home, and I needed the support of a person like Bilal to keep me here. And so community means so much to me, and building community also is a huge responsibility, not only just as a community member, but as an admissions counselor in my role, helping to recruit some of the brightest young minds from across the world and building a community that can continue the legacies that alumni and our students continue to build, and our faculty and our staff. And so I've wrestled with this community, I've questioned this community, I've fought this community, I've embraced this community. As a student organizer, as an alum who's getting calls from students, crying, trying to figure it out, and having students walk into my office, wanting to just figure out what their next steps might be. And so I have multiple relationships with this institution, and I'm still wrestling with it, but I'm comfortable with that wrestling. And I hope to continue that work in whatever capacity I serve in at Williams.
I think it's important for me to offer at least one coordinate in my own journey before coming to Williams. I'm from what I like to call the Middle South. For those who don't know what that is, that's Oklahoma. I grew up in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, which is 8 miles west of Greenwood, for those who are familiar with the story of Black Wall Street. I grew up in an environment that was full of entrenched racial violence. And I grew up in an environment where I had lots of folks who were actively forging community, whether that's through support, protection, advocacy. And so that has certainly informed my journey. Coming to Williams, I had lots of experiences as a student affairs professional, living a fairly nomadic life and being forced to always build the kind of community that I wanted to see around me. And so once I arrived on campus, I assumed that would be the case, and it certainly was. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge the sort of overlapping valences of community here, right? So I think we all know that at the center of the work that we do are the students, and the Black and brown students here at Williams, whether they're affiliated with the student organizations of MNCO, WASO, SOCA, BSU, Vista, or Ritmo Latino, or other spaces that are studying, celebrating, and considering Black life and culture, such as Kusika, Zambezi. I was very intentional about connecting to all of those organizations and being able to provide support in various ways. And so to hear the sister talk about the work, and hear Bilal talk about the work in terms of making sure that folks stay here at Williams, that was something that I know was an important objective of my role here. And so I did a lot of work around that, and then even beyond the student valences, I think about working and collaborating with faculty, and the faculty and staff really navigating some of the same challenges. And as soon as I arrived at campus this weekend, I read the paper. I read the Williams record, and on the front lines it's saying that staff morale is at a low. Folks are feeling alienated. And I'm like, we're still having this conversation? 10 years after I left Williams, and some of the alum who are coming back, I'm sure you're wondering, are we still having this conversation? I mean, it speaks to the architecture of this place. And it speaks to our work and the importance of the work that we do in terms of creating a space where we can not only be safe, but more importantly, be brave, and we can flourish. And so what does that look like day to day? And so a part of that for me was forging partnerships, working across departments, right? So I came through campus life and working at the Multicultural Center, but I collaborated a lot with the dance department. Africana Studies was one of our primary partners, especially folks like Shanti Singham, who I sing her praise, and Sandra, of course, being a mentor of mine. But working with WICMA, also working with Latino Studies, but really working across academic departments, and then sort of stepping outside of the Williams bubble. When I was applying for my role at Williams, I was also applying for the same role at MCLA, which is ironic to say the least. And so having that experience really gave me a glimpse into the differences between what's happening here in Williamstown versus what's happening in North Adams. And because I understood those dynamics, I was actively building bridges across those invisible boundaries and working closely with the MCLA Alana department. So the brother's name was Tom Alexander, I believe. Tom Alexander was one of my favorite collaborators. We worked hard to build relationships between Black and brown communities between North Adams and Williamstown. Also collaborated a lot with Mass Mocha. I even went so far as to Pittsfield. For me, it's like, if we're going to build community, we're going to reach deep and wide, because that's exactly the kind of infrastructure that we need in order for us all to flourish. And so for me, as someone in my own sort of organizing and activism work, I understand that you kind of have to get down with the nitty gritty, and you really have to actively think about what does that look like, and who are all the stakeholders, and you have to imagine community with all of those valences and considerations in mind. And so for me, I think when I consider sort of what does the Black community look like in Williams, and sort of how I navigated those spaces, I mean, those are some of the strategies that I use in addition to my own social needs, meaning, I collaborated with Meze. We did a series of gatherings when it was on Water Street. It's on the hill now, but back then, Meze was a site, for social activity. And I worked closely with Nancy Thomas, who was from Oklahoma. And so we worked a lot to sort of create that space for young professionals here in the Berkshires. And so those are some of the things outside of my own personal gatherings at my home, where Sharifa used to show up even as an alum randomly on my birthday all the time. And it's like, oh, well, we know something's happening at Arif's house, so, but those were some of the ways, and also collaborating with folks to amplify the things that were happening. When we brought in the company Hedi Malem, so how do we connect them to the community, right? And so those are strategies that I use, and the ways that I felt that I could support community, help to build and bolster community here at Williams.
Thank you, Arif. So Arif just gave incredible examples of those porous circles that I started talking about. Developing the habit of thinking about yourself as standing on a porous circle, or even porous concentric circles, where you have the freedom to move back and forth, to stand on the circumference, to be in the center. That was a strategy that I also adopted when I accepted the position at Williams, because I couldn't live in a place where I only had one fixed point, one fixed community. And so one of the things that all of us, I think you heard this, encourage young people to do is to be curious and to think of themselves as broader than the walls of this institution. One of the things that I do love about Williams is that when you go to some colleges or universities, there are visible fences around them that separate them from the landscape and from the people who live in that environment. There is a ceremonial gate here, but fences, not really. The fences exist in people's hearts and minds. The physical fences are not there, but these other fences are there. And so the work ahead for everyone is to help people understand that the fences exist in your mind and your heart, and that you have the opportunity to be fluid. It's not easy because of things like transportation, which is, like that's still the bane of our existence here, the challenge of transportation, of public transportation. Because everyone doesn't have a car, whether they're a student, a staff member, or a resident of the county. And so sometimes we have to rely on, I learned that the hard way. I came from New York, I didn't know how to drive. And if it wasn't for David Smith and his wife, Vivian Cook Bakoy, I, wouldn't have figured it out. I wouldn't have figured out how to get to the grocery store, and just like basic things like that. So that generosity is always a need that people have, and I think you heard these are generous people, as I know you are. And so the generosity of the staff, the faculty, the students, and the community members, because there are community residents who also adopt our students and who also adopt us and who help us have anchors and roots here. And so I think that the task ahead, because there's always in a community like this, Arif just mentioned, that we have challenges. There are always going to be challenges in a community like this because people change, administrations change, goals change, fiscal policies change. There are people on the staff who are sitting in this office, in this audience, they know what I mean. The goals, the vision shifts. And so as alums, it's important for you not only to celebrate what's already happened, but to keep our feet to the fire, to keep the institution's feet to the fire, and to really think about your own role in these circles. And how can you be present, and how can you urge us to be the best that we can be? And so, that said, I'd like to turn to Africana Studies now. And I'd like for each of you to really think about the role that Africana Studies has played and can continue to play in this community.
I mean, to me, the greatest role that Africana Study plays is the giants in which fills those roles, the human beings that walk every day here. People who are not even known by their names, just by their RMB, JMB. Right? It's just like, they got so much weight here that it's just, their presence is encouraging. The recent attack basically on the free speech of students on the vigil around Love and Green's leaving their expression of free speech of expressing radical black love for their loss and their grieving, and the attack of moving that from their location. There was a need to hold space there in that hallway of people who filled a huge need, or in a lot of these young students who were coming here in their classes, and in their absence, the holding space, the evening of that event when it happened, students gathered to kind of build it back, to put back what was lost. And the first people on the scene was members of Africana Studies coming to check in. Are you okay? Is everybody okay? The first people that they called were people from Africana Studies to check in, to feel and hear that it's going to be okay. And being there for those 6 hours that evening as the students processed it, and just seeing the Africana's bodies, human beings, their presence there, it helped to calm young black girls that I would walk back to their dorms crying that they lied to me here in the missions. I didn't know that this was going to happen to me, like in deep sobbing that they felt that they were safe here and this had happened. The deep sobbing and pain that was felt. If they didn't have offices to go to where black faces were, then I couldn't do it alone. The people that we staff, we couldn't do it. So the Africana, the department, as a staff member, I feel like I'm in a supportive role. We have a good team to help get these students through, because there's things happening every day. Some say it's microaggressions. I call it aggression. It was a straight attack. And so their presence here makes all the difference. And the more, the merrier, the more we can get, the better things will be. But I want to just echo that point. Your presence as trustees, or as alumni, your voice, your coming here lets this campus know that you're watching, that your spirits are still here, that the occupations or the occupiers are still here in spirit. And so when we call on the higher ups, we call on our ancestors, and you are our ancestors. And so we need you. And so please keep us in your prayers and your thoughts, but also keep it on the phone. Call these people. When you hear stuff, read the paper. You read something happening, call and check on us. So what's going on with our babies down there at Williams? You know, check on your babies. We need you.
it's hard for me to put into words what Africana means to me. If I could have majored in it, I would have majored in it. People like the late Leslie Brown sat me down and taught me to write my first paper. People like Ngoni Munemo sat me down and said, this is not how you write. This is not how you research a political science paper. Like, this is how you should approach this topic. They were so essential to my identity formation, to my continuation in academia. And so when I think of Africana studies, yes, I think about the unit, but I think about the people as well. And so in my current capacity, I don't get to collaborate as much with Africana as I would like. But I know that our students feel the presence of the faculty who are both in the unit and who are affiliated with Africana, because as Bilal mentioned, it's so important to have these faces on campus, to have the support within the classroom and outside of the classroom, to know that there's always going to be someone there who can kind of help contextualize all the things that you're seeing, feeling, observing on this campus, because it can be a really hard journey to navigate. But also it can be a fun one to navigate and a joyous one that we can always come together and laugh together and celebrate accomplishments together, study together, be in conflict together. And so Africana continues to be the thread that links me to Williams, the piece that I continue to revisit when I think about my 4 years as a student here at the college. When I think about my role as in the BSU, my 4 years, we had a faculty advisory committee, and that was made up mostly of folks in Africana, and they helped us think about strategy, to think about how to organize, think about the theory that can help inform our movement. And so Africana means so much, and we need to continue to support its growth, its space on this campus, and I'm looking forward to being part of that mission.
I just want to echo this notion that Africana Studies shows up. When I was here at Williams, we had issues as well. And there was an organization that formed called Stand With Us, or a movement that formed that was called Stand With Us. And with that incident, some of the first responders were Africana Studies faculty. They were a part of those interstitial spaces, having those conversations about how to respond to situations like this on campus. And so Africana Studies has been that example in terms of the moral imperative, to respond to injustice across campus. And so that is certainly one of the many hallmarks of the Africana Studies Department. But there's also this, I'll say selfishly, this intellectual piece that I think is important to celebrate about Africana Studies and its department, its core faculty, whether that's through the sort of student work or even my own personal interest in Africana Studies, and the way that even touched me and even helped me to even articulate my own academic and intellectual journey, right? And the work that I continue to do today as an organizer, but more importantly, as using my artistic work, in political ways, understanding the importance of African-rooted performance practices and visual cultures, and being able to mobilize those traditions in ways that impact communities and transform communities and empower communities. And so I think that that's another hallmark of Africana Studies. And so folks that really supported my own journey, and Leslie Brown is one of those folks, and I want to sing her praise. Ernest Brown is another person I want to sing his praise, because without those pillars, those folks, I know that I could have potentially left this space. They kept me here along with folks like Sandra, and empowered me to do the work, my life's work, my heart's work. And even folks like Alex Willingham. You got to name the names. We have to bring the names in the room, because without any of those folks, Africana Studies wouldn't be living. It wouldn't be alive. It wouldn't be shining bright the way that it is today. And one of the many another reason why I even came back is to have a conversation with Neil Roberts about his work around marronage and how that work can provide theoretical context for contemporary urban maroon societies. And what does that look like in a city like Chicago? How can we use that work in a city like Chicago to transform the communities that are ravaged by violence? So Africana Studies is a beacon here at Williams, shining bright. And so bright that I decided to come back and get some more. And so it's there's value, and it's important to name the folks that are doing the work, that have done the work, and continue to contribute, to the broader impact of Africana Studies here and other academic institutions, but also in the community where, the students and families that I work with, they don't know anything about Williams College and Africana Studies, but the work definitely transforms their lives all the same.
Thank you, everyone. So one of the things that I heard, and I'm sure you heard, is that memory is a really important part of everybody's living, and shared memories offer the opportunity to stitch together a rich history. And so over the course of this weekend, you've started sharing memories, and I urge you to continue to do that, because without what you know and what you've experienced, the work that continues here doesn't have the depth or the insight to be strong and vibrant in the future. Africana Studies, having it, was the vision of a group of faculty who pressed forward for that, and some of those people are present in this room. And so that it thrives, that it continues, you've heard from people on the panel that you have a stake in the health of that. You have a stake in the health of the college, and you have a stake in the health of the young people all of the young people who come to Williams College, because the challenges that we face as an institution exist in the world, and they are very cognizant of that. It's palpable to them. They have concerns and fears. They also have aspirations and plans. And so while they are here, this is a place for them, in my opinion, to practice and hone not only their intellectual and creative capacity, but their humanity. And so Africana Studies is a part of that story. It's a part of that work. It's a part of the method of becoming a stronger, resilient human being, because those are the people that we need to face the world that we're living in, not only here on this campus, but in the world today. And I'm wondering if anybody has any questions for the panelists. Look at that. Oh, we got one.
But I wanted to call out the memory of Don, because he was a member of our community too. And, Don, we recently lost him, but he was such an important member for me of the community, because he was, he worked in New York, but he came up all the time to be with Sandra every weekend, all summers, all concerts, everything. But then when he got near retirement, he spent years working on incredible community outreach here, especially in Pittsfield with the Juneteenth celebration, and working in North Adams as well. And so it's funny, but you mentioned Ernest, and for me, Ernest and Don were two people who really broke through and made the Williams community part of a much broader community in Pittsfield and North Adams. So I just wanted to remember his name with Sandra up there.
Thank you, Shanti. She's referencing my late husband, who who was a Chicagoan and a New Yorker, and wasn't studying nothing about Williams College. He came up here because his wife got a job here, right? But Thank you, Shanti, because he really did embrace this community and did a lot of work to make it a more vibrant, hospitable place. Yes.
If we're calling out people, I also want to just really honor Quayao's memory. He was, I don't know if people remember, a lot of people maybe don't remember him, but he worked with Sandra, with Kusika, and that was, in my first couple years here, I think the most welcoming. He was just like a ray of sunshine for me and I know for a lot of students. So I miss him to this day, actually. So yeah, that's one more.
Thank you, and so do we. We lost a lot of, thank you for we've lost a lot of people. The late Obo Ade, who helped us build Kusika, who was Ernest Brown's, they were brothers. And Quayao was my brother. And I brought him here to Williams from New York and he hunkered down and did brilliant work and became a father figure to so many students here at Williams College. And so thank you for calling out, because that's why we have this plant back here, right? So that we can remember our ancestors. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing the stories. I'm just really full right now. But as people are calling out names, people, I don't know these names, right? So I want to look at a way we can not only have it on the video, but maybe on the website or something, all of the Black faculty who have come through Williams, and really documenting this in a way so that, and in the picture, a little bio, but something that tells about how people felt about them, and so that people then can be able to feel. But not only the faculty, staff. Because this story, Bilal, of your great-grandparents, I mean, this is amazing. Who knew? So we've looked at students historically who've come to Williams. I think it's important to look at faculty who have been here historically, but then staff that we don't even know those stories. And where can that be, and how can it be accessible? And, yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to call out Chuck Davis. Sandra, as a mama to so many of us in the dance community, brought Chuck Davis in, and I also took Don's class on the Harlem Renaissance. It was brilliant. And Chuck Davis brought an entire community with him through Sandra, and brought gourds from Africa and talked to us about home and what does home mean. And we had an entire conversation for that time period about how to make Williams our home and what did community look like. And we looked at African communities and what translated and what value systems we could then instill here within our own friendships. And I wanted to mention Chuck Davis.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes.
And I just want to add on to something that Deborah Robinson mentioned. Yesterday I was at the museum, and one of the faculty mentioned that when they asked about could we get information about the history of Blacks of Williams, they came up with a box. And I thought in the 4 years that I was here, that box could have been filled. And I'm just wondering, I think this is food for thought for the college in terms of how we can start archiving that information, because there is a lot of information just about the faculty, about students, about events here. But I'm wondering how we could start actually archiving that, because it's a very rich history, and maybe it's a discussion that we can continue to really start doing it now, because I agree there's some of these names I'm not familiar with, and there are people that are still in my memory that haven't been mentioned. So maybe that's something we can discuss over the weekend.
So thank you for saying that, to both of you for saying that, because memory is very much a part of community. Because without it, you're rootless, right? So perhaps, Ron, one of the things that maybe you guys can do is if you have some index cards, like just ask everybody to maybe write down some names or a significant memory that they have, from their 4 years here at Williams that they might want further investigation from someone.
Yeah, and this is just a very shameless plug that we have an opportunity for oral histories to be recorded this afternoon, right? So from 3 to 4:30, when we have time over in special collections, we have a room, we have questions that we have. So we're being very intentional about starting that process because we recognize and, trying to uncover all the information that will help us think through how to frame the weekend, that there are so many stories that we don't yet know, right? We have glimpses of them, we have snapshots of it. And it really is, James brought up this great metaphor last night of, the box, filling, boxes and boxes, of information. So, I really encourage everyone to take advantage of that. But there are other things that I think we should continue to talk through and think about in terms of structurally what we could do. So I just wanted to shout that out.
Thanks. Yes.
My name is Dan Perkins, class of 78, and I really cannot express, like Deborah, this is very emotional for us. We're class of 70s. And Ron, thank you, and James, for this vision to bring us together to talk about community across time. And it's really quite moving to hear the progression of community as it's existed in your generation and in your time. And this has been kind of an eye-opener. It's been both painful to see so many of the issues continuing. It is hopeful and exciting for me to see that you're able to then still look forward by leveraging the strengths of the past. So thank you for this forum to bring us together. And I can't help but think back to the 70s when I was here. And I'm so honored to, as we're calling on people who are responsible for all of us being here, I have to recognize one who was responsible for us during our time. And and I'd like you to stand because you were our black and this is so important because although not now a part of the former Williams community, you will forever be a part of the Williams community. And you fought battles for us when you didn't have a broad array of support, when you were here by yourself taking on very difficult tasks. You left when our class ended. But it's important for us to celebrate our living, our immediate heroes and people who are now going on. And I hope, Ron James, that what we can do from this is to think on multiple levels about community. There is and always will be, as long as there's a Williams College, a need for the immediate community caring for students. But it's also important that we have moments like this, that we recognize that these communities, like waves rippling out across a lake, continue to stay in touch with one another and then back to the student and the home base here at Williams. So I just wanted to say this has been wonderful. We love hearing this, and I really need to get to know you because I'm in Chicago and we're not going to be brothers, okay? So we're going to make some things happen there. And that, Chicago becomes part of Williams base, and that the Black Williams community in Chicago reinforces the Black community in Oklahoma, in other places, in New York, and that we can continue to grow on multiple levels.
So, and thank you for saying that. I just want to remind everybody that Michael Reed is the person who had the vision to form the Black Alumni Association, the Black Alumni Network. And that was work that when I first came to Williams, I was privileged to do with him and a small group of students to go to the OIC and make cold calls to some of you to beg you to come back. And that was an introduction to me for the depth of this community. It was my way of like hearing voices and hearing stories of people that I didn't know yet, but just a voice on the phone. And then when we invited people to come back, people came. Some of them were angry as hell, and others were really happy to be back. And so we're at the point now where there, where there are ways of you are coming through and sharing your memory. And so that is something that I just also want to remind you of, that one of you set this in motion.
Yes. I'm grateful to be here and feeling very blessed, and I want to shout out Joe Harris's name. I'm hoping that we had the blessing, Mike Darden and I had the blessing of being able to interview Joe, and we're going to show that tape, at dinner time?
5 o'clock
At Elm Tree House at 5 o'clock, so I hope you will come. Joe Harris is the first African American professor who benefited from the takeover in 1969, and I'm particularly full because if you are blessed to come and see that tape, this is exactly what he envisioned. I mean, this is exactly what he talks about, that his presence here would result and grow just, I'm getting goosebumps because I can hear what he was saying. So you must come and see. He will be 89 years old in a little while. And Rose, his wife, one of the reasons they're not here is she turned 87 this week. And they are alive and well. And when we were here, we didn't have the benefit of Africana studies and this, really large number of African and African American presence as teachers. But Joe brought his family. Joe and Rose came, and it really made a difference to have a black family. They had 2 small children who grew up here for 6, 7 years. They opened up their home. We ate dinner there. So we engaged intellectually as well as socially, and they were like, the family that we didn't have when we came to Williams. And, I'm particularly moved by your story, Bilal, and Joe Harris, who would have known, has a similar story that he had family, and he worked as a teenager, college student here in Williams, and he never imagined he washed dishes somewhere. And his stepfather was the cook at one of the fraternities. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And he said he would never come back to Williams. And so you must come and see the tape.
Are you leaving it with us too? For the archive?
Well, that's a different issue, but Joe wants to be a part of that. He hasn't seen it yet. But we just did it.
So one last thing, and it's time. This has been rich, and you will continue speaking and sharing, but we need to move on to the next panel. Yes, Ron?
Yes. Can I just say one thing? Yes. I want to say for everybody in the audience that the benefit of black folk being here is not only for black folk. Yeah. I have a lot of white folk that come in my office that benefit, and I'm sure that everybody or faculty, but there are students here that benefit from our presence being here. We have a rich history, a spiritual, deep history in which we have resources to pull from, in which they come to the office and get from also. And so it's a benefit not only just for black folks, but for the other people that exist here. They see that strength, and they also tap into that strength. And that strength is attached to your strength. So it's not just about us benefiting us. Everybody's enriched because.
Thank you, Bilal. Thank you, Adrianna. Thank you, Arif. On to the next.